Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services, if we can please kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices, or please place them on silent. Thank you.
I found for myself that it's useful to put our phones on airplane mode because even when they're silent, they seem to make a lot of noise. We're going to begin with the words of Psalm 139. Ana elech miruchecha ve'ana mipanecha evrach im esach shamayim shamata ve'atzia sheol hineka esachan ve'shachar אשכנה באחרית ים, גם שם ידך תנחני, ותאחזני ימינך, ואומר אך חושך ישופני, ולילה אור בעדני. גם חושך לא יחשיך ממך, ולילה כיום יאיר. כחשיכה, כאורה, כי אתה קנית. קנית חיליותי, ולי מה יקוריך, אל מעצמו ראשיהם, אספרם מכל ירבון, הקיצותי ועודי עמך. Where can I escape from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I descend to the depths, you are there too. If I take wing with the dawn to come to rest on the western horizon, even there your hand will be guiding me. Your right hand will be holding me fast. If I say, surely darkness will conceal me, night will provide me with cover. Darkness is not dark for you. Night is as light as day. Darkness and light for you are the same. It was you who created my essence. How weighty your thoughts seem to me, O God, how great their number. I count them, but they exceed the grains of sand. I end, but I am always with you. We gather today to mourn the loss of Gloria Aron, who at the remarkable age of 101 has now left this life. And we're also gathering today to honor her long life and the lessons that it holds for us. Gloria had an amazing strength of character that allowed her to remain engaged and constant throughout her life, no matter what challenges the years placed in her way. Her life path echoed the psalmist's recognition of the constancy of God's presence, and she was able to approach even advanced age with calm and contentment, aware of the passage of time, but still finding joy in her family before passing peacefully from this world to the next. Through the wisdom of age, Gloria knew the truth articulated by the sage Kohelet thousands of years ago about the varied periods and experiences of a person's life, experiences she went through during her life. A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting the planted, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, a time for scattering stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time for shunning embraces, a time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for ripping and a time for sewing, a time for silence and a time for speaking, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for war and a time for peace. To share memories of Gloria's life, we're now going to welcome some of those closest to her, beginning with her son, Mark.
Well, about a day ago, I used to be a 73-year-old kid when my mom was alive. I could always look to Mom to see that she was there. I could say I could always say, well, gee, there's someone older. This is going to keep on going. And now the shield against death is gone, and now I'm it. I'm the oldest of the family. None of us get any guarantees when our lives come to an end, and how very precious our lives are. People change, and yet there are some traits that are lasting. Our mom always seemed to be such a blur of activity. She was always the last one up in the household, preparing something in the kitchen or cleaning up. And even though we'd have to get up so early the next day as kids for school. For family dinners and holiday meals, my dad would often ask her to sit down because she's always preparing one last thing. But then, of course, the irony was, well, maybe not ironic, but my dad would then ask, hey, where's the ketchup? She was formal. She signed her letters to me from college as mother. Her love language was not with words or with touch. She didn't ask for hugs and say, I love you. Rather, she'd make a sour cream cake and ask you to put on your galoshes on a rainy day. I don't know where those galoshes are. There were the ways that she'd let you know that she cared. She made sure that we were fed. I was very popular in high school during lunchtime, as I would come to school with a shopping bag full of food with extra sandwiches and potato chips that I dished out since there was no way that I could eat it all. But this didn't stop from her commenting on your weight. All the kids and grandchildren could get zapped by Grandma. Oh boy. Debbie rightly pointed out that she looked at the world through the eyes of a chubby little girl who would, get teased, and so was very, focused on that. As she aged, she expressed more gratitude for her life and her family, with those words. She could talk about how thoughtful or smart my dad was to provide for her, being at Lionsgate. She was so thankful for Debbie as a daughter, where she would literally go the extra mile. She would be able to respond in kind if we said that we loved her. We think that we know our loved ones, and yet when we get third-party verification from another parent or an adult or family friend, we find that they're able to handle things much different than we expected. Our mom was very independent and didn't seem to have that drive to socialize, but but she seemed to be very connected to these other women at the luncheon table. You know, she would make it sound like she didn't even know them, but then the staff would say, she was the one to facilitate conversation, you know, at the table, which who knew? Some traits were lasting and never changed for her. Debbie mentioned how the nurse was amazed that she had the wherewithal to even signal the nursing desk during her last moments as she had collapsed. Literally, she had dealt with some medical emergencies on her own, and the details are just too difficult to mention, but she did it until help arrived. Losing my mom has reminded me how precious and brief life is. I may be the oldest now, but I am also, will always be her child. The kid that sent off with extra sandwiches and had to be reminded to put on the galoshes. I'll carry her strength, her humor, and her love with me as best I can. She taught me that love doesn't always need words. It can show up as a cake baked with care or a gentle but sharp observation. She was known for her sharp observations. I hope to carry forward the best parts of her, honoring her memory every day. There's a Yiddish proverb that says, God could not be everywhere, so he created mothers. My mom may not have believed that she was a connector or a leader, but she had a way of impacting people more deeply than she realized. She leaves behind a legacy of love expressed through action, a resilience that inspired us all, and a humor that kept us grounded. We will miss her, but we will also celebrate her strength, you know, her wit, and her way of quietly holding us together.
Debbie.
You would never know that our mother, Gloria Aron, was only 4'8" by the time she died, because she was really such a large figure in all of our lives. The last time I went with her to an exam and they measured her height, the nurse told her that she was 4'8", and she said, "Oh no, I'm 4'11". She was humble, but she knew her worth. As our family has begun to share memories, the word that keeps coming up in describing our mother is strong. It shouldn't have been a surprise to us at 101 that she passed on, but it actually was, because despite all kinds of challenges, she just kept on chugging along. 2 hip replacements, melanoma, thyroid cancer, and she just took it all in stride and kept going. In this last week, she had COVID, but when she was told that Marty and Beth were being honored this week at Carnegie Hall for their work with the Zamir Choral Foundation, she said, "I really should get to New York to that." Frankly, she sometimes exhausted those of us who are younger than her. As Mark mentioned, at family celebrations, when some of us would have been happy to just leave the final dishes in the sink, she had her apron and her gloves, plastic gloves on, and insisted on washing every last pot and putting them away. She was always the last person standing in the kitchen until really about only like a year or 2 ago. As a younger person, she was also a bit of a quiet rebel in her own family. Being social and lighthearted as a girl was what was valued in her family over academics. And it really bothered our grandparents that she was very serious-minded and liked to study and get good grades. She went to NYU for a year as a music major until our grandfather pulled her out, and then she signed up for a clerk typist program and began to work. But then she proceeded to win a New York City competition in typing, coming in first place. Our Aunt Diane came in second place and invited our mom over to her house, which is where she met Diane's brother, which was our father, Sam. She found her place with our father where they had similar values. In their retirement years, they took classes at local community college. They traveled all over the world. She supported him when he became legally blind in his mid-60s and always appreciated him. Samuel was a good man, she would say. Just a word, too, about music in our family. We've often been more ready to make note of our father's contribution to our musical education. He was the son of a cantor, and he used to sing Yiddish songs on the Boston radio station with my aunt as a boy. Yiddish records and classical music were always playing in the house. But it really was our mother that made sure that we got piano lessons, learned how to read music, and insisted that we practice. She taught us that nothing comes to you without hard work. She was also strong in commitment to family. My brothers and I have memories of driving into Brooklyn every week to bring groceries to our grandmother after our grandfather passed away. Mark had mentioned she was really, really independent, and she would be grateful for help if we offered it, but she would never ask for it. She had expectations that she was supposed to be taking care of herself. At one point after a hospitalization, Marty and Mark and I decided that we would trade off calling her every single day just to keep one eye on her, because she wouldn't tell us that something was going wrong, but in the course of a conversation, if you called, then you sometimes would find out. So this was our plan. But after 1 week of this, she declared, "What is wrong with you people? You're calling me every day." She goes, "This is unnecessary." She was really a doer, and that was the way she expressed her love. Each of us have stories about mom showing up and helping us with food, cleaning, childcare, and as Mark said, sour cream cakes, especially when our children were little. She apologized to me last year that she didn't have a full kitchen anymore in her assisted living facility, so she couldn't make her sweet and sour meatballs for some family celebration. We used to say that she wasn't expressive in words, but as Mark said, that really isn't true anymore. In these last years, I would hear our kids end a phone call with, "I love you, Grandma," and she would pipe right up, "I love you, honey." She also started saying wonderful things about her own children, but not normally to the person involved. My brothers would tell me, "Mom said you are an angel for visiting her." And to me, she would say, "Can you believe that Mark and Andrea, they drove 5 hours from Connecticut to get to me and have a chance to visit, and then they turned around and went right back?" And then she would say, "I'm just amazed about that Marty and Beth. They're so good to host so many people in their home. They invite friends who have nowhere else to go on the holiday." And to Andrea, she would say, "That Andrea is such a wonderful artist. I can't imagine how she made those beautiful pendant for you." And then she would say about Beth, "I get so many compliments on this jacket. It must be something that Beth bought me because she has such style. She can do anything." And about my husband, Joel, she said, "Joel is such a friendly person. By the way, what time do you have to leave and make him his supper?" She was, for some reason, really always worried about Joel getting his supper. So in our family, among our siblings, we've worked out over the years how we have to share our words from our mom with each other, which she expressed in her own way. And in these last days, when I visited with her at Lionsgate, she would always say, "Thank you, Deborah, you made my day. Mom, you have made so many of our days sweeter, and we will cherish those memories."
So I want to invite up Eli, Ari, Talia, and Dan just to speak on behalf of the grandchildren.
When Grandpa, Sam Aron, passed away in 2007, it was the first time I experienced the loss of a grandparent, and I've been fortunate to have 3 living grandparents until just last year. I was maybe just a little bit angstier at 16 than I am today. I have fond memories of spending time at Grandma and Grandpa's when I was young, but I'd like to focus on Grandma's life for what has been now more than half of my own lifetime. When Grandpa passed, I didn't consider how much time Grandma had left. She continued, to be the rock that we had always had, even though she came into a newfound independence in a way I had never seen before. I can't imagine losing Grandpa after spending a lifetime together, and yet she thrived, because of course she did. Why wouldn't she? That's who she was. With friends at Lionsgate and her own full living space until just last year at the age of 100, she was incredibly resilient and self-sufficient. She showed us that you're never too old to reinvent yourself. In living across the country, I'm acutely aware of the limited time I get with my family, and I cherish the time that I do get to spend with everyone. For many of you here, that has tended most often to be for Thanksgiving and Passover. I will always be thankful for the time that I had with Grandma and for the Jewish traditions that were instilled in me, which, among other things, is eating. And it's no secret that both of these holidays involve feasts. Even if for a long time I wasn't eating meat and therefore Grandma's meatballs, the cousins would often compete on number of servings in order to win Grandma's favor. Grandma prided herself in her truthfulness. I think everyone here probably has at least a few examples that come to mind, where she told you exactly what she was thinking, and of course we loved her for it. It was her ability to unapologetically be herself and her strength that drove the resiliency we all witnessed during that period of her life. Her legacy lives on in our family, the bonds we have together, and the traditions that she and Grandpa passed down to us, and the resilience we carry with us.
When I think of my grandma, Gloria Aron, one word comes to mind: authentic. Grandma was, without question, undeniably and unapologetically herself. She lived a simple yet beautiful life, one that was deep, substantial, and true. She loved her people, and they loved her endlessly. Authentic. As mentioned, Grandma's honesty was one of the most defining parts of who she was. And most of the time, it was wonderful. Her love radiated, and she was never shy about expressing her pride in us. Every time I visited her apartment, there was a new magnet on her Frigidaire featuring one of her grandchildren or great-grandchildren, or a fresh birthday card proudly displayed on her kitchen counter. She adored those birthday cards. And if yours arrived late, well, she'd let you know. Eli sent me the most beautiful birthday card, she'd say, and it even got here early. And when I say honest, I mean honest. I can only imagine the unchecked length of time of my dad's pre-dinner Dvar Torahs now that Grandma won't be there to cut him off with a firm, "Joel, the food is getting cold." One of my favorite memories with Grandma happened just a few years ago. Even in her late 90s, she was in remarkably good shape, though some memory issues had started to present. She asked me what I had been up to, and I told her that I was finishing medical school. Her face lit up. "Wow, my grandson is going to be a doctor," she beamed. Roughly 1 hour later, she asked me the same question. "I'm finishing medical school, Grandma." And just like before, a fresh grin spread across her face. "Wow, my grandson is going to be a doctor." There was something so beautiful and pure about watching her deep, true pride as she relived those moments, as if for the first time. Grandma was authentic in every way until her last day. Honest, loving, and deeply proud of her family. She lived a life filled with meaning, surrounded by the people she loved and who loved her just as fiercely in return. When Grandma's there, it's home. So, Grandma, thank you for everything, for your sometimes brutal honesty, for your award-worthy meatballs, for your effortless coziness, and for your endless, endless love. Thank you for showing us all how to live a life that is beautiful and true and authentic. We love you always.
Every phone call with my grandma would lead to the same question. Hi, Tal, how's New York? And I loved talking to my grandma about New York. While we lived in Brooklyn almost a century apart, our lives had a lot of similarities. Subway commutes from Brooklyn to Manhattan for work, eating a sandwich at a bar on Wall Street for lunch, summer beach trips to the Rockaways or the Catskills, walking around Williamsburg, Brooklyn on Shabbat, her to visit her grandparents, or me just walking around my neighborhood doing errands. She was a model to me of how to be a strong, independent, adaptable Jewish woman who did things her own way. At a time when women her age weren't always encouraged to prioritize education, she was an avid reader and studier who spent time at NYU and held jobs as a typist and for the city of Camden. And while she valued this independence, at the same time, she had so much pride in the home that she built on Cranford Road with my grandpa and my mom and my uncles. After my grandpa passed away, I was so impressed with the way that she reestablished her independence at Lionsgate, living in her own apartment until 100 years old. While my grandma and I lived in a Brooklyn with different societal norms and ways of life, I was always touched by how adaptable she could be. She may not have understood my period of wearing ripped jeans and a nose ring, but she laughed, made a funny comment about it, and accepted it. And when our phone conversations would sometimes veer into what I'm looking for in a future partner, she always, up until the last phone call, would tell me not to rush and to take my time, which always calmed my anxieties. Like anyone, though, her adaptability, of course, had limits. For example, when my Uncle Marty got her an iPad a few years ago, she tried it for a month or two. When she found out that not only did you have to pay for internet, but also how expensive Comcast should be, she famously declared, "I tried being online for a little bit, but I think I prefer to be offline." We could all learn a lesson or two from that. The unique gift of a grandparent living until 101 is having the time to appreciate how my relationship with her evolved from childhood to adulthood. For example, these reflections on and identification with my grandma's independence and adaptability have only evolved as I've gotten older. But for most of my life, I remember my grandma as a constant provider of comfort, of delicious food, of a brutally honest comment, of pride in her family, and of love. For one of her recent birthdays, I gave her a coaster that read, "Somebody in Brooklyn loves you," which she used and looked at every day while drinking her tea. And it is so true. Grandma, this Brooklyn girl loves you so much and will miss you so much. Thank you for the example that you set.
When I think back on what Grandma meant to me, it's that she is truly at the root of some of the things that I value the most in my life. But that is not always obvious when it's first glance. That's not the type of person that Grandma was. She was never the loudest at the table, but she made it all happen. Together with her husband Sam, they made a home and raised 3 kids who not only got along but enjoyed being together and who chose to stay close. And because of this, we got to grow up raised around a big extended family. It means that I got to know my cousins and my extended cousins, my aunt, my uncles. She had a great relationship with my dad and my dad's parents, and she invited them over for Seders. It meant that my childhood had the warmth of a family that got along and liked being around each other. Something that as I've grown, I realize is more and more not a given. It means that as she aged, my mom, uncles, and their partners could come together as a team that loved and supported each other, to be there for her in ways that was
just amazing and inspiring to see. But it wasn't just that she raised a close family, it's that she opened her home to us over and over again, and she welcomed everyone in whenever she could. Passovers, Thanksgivings, meatballs, sour applesauce, just massive turkey legs. Washing stacks of dishes taller than she was in her yellow rubber gloves that came up to her elbows. Grandma made all that possible, and that was her gift to us. And so not only did we grow up in a big extended family, but those relationships developed and became meaningful in ways that are only possible when you get to see each other and be together. And when you really look at it, that's her legacy. She loved her family, and that love grew beyond her, and it's still growing. But the roots are with her. That was clear down to the very last time I saw her, just a few weeks ago. I walked into her room at Lionsgate to find her asleep on her recliner with pictures of her great-granddaughter spread out over her lap and a magnifying glass by her side. So I say thank you, Grandma. It will be impossible to get together as a family and not think of you. Because while you weren't always the loudest at the table, without you, there would not have been a table, and there would be no family surrounding it.
Marty and Beth.
I'd like to make sure that I express the thanks on behalf of our entire family to everyone who has shown such great acts of kindness and condolences, to those who are also on live stream that are watching. You need to know how much that has meant to our family. And I want to, in particular, mention the amazing place at Lionsgate where my mother spent her last years. She lived till 101, but until age 100, she lived in her own independent two-bedroom apartment at Lionsgate. And she had everything she needed there. She had a community around her. She had people that she knew, some of the families who are represented here today, that she knew from Cherry Hill, from raising a family in the area, or people who worked with my father at RCA. I also want to especially acknowledge my cousin David, who traveled here all the way from Seattle to be here today. Family was so important to my mother. And our family, one of the things that she exemplified so poignantly was how close family should be and how much we should care for each other. You can't choose the family that you're born into, but I was blessed with an amazing brother and sister-in-laws, brother-in-law, and it has been an incredible embrace of our family. It is true, my sister Debbie is an angel, and she was the angel for my mother because she was closest in proximity and she was there for her at all times. I sent an email out to my cousin Ken, who is Mark's roommate at Rutgers. He's in Paris, could not be here today, but I wanted to read for you some of his thoughts when I sent the email about my mom's passing. I recall so many times how she reached out to me as a young child with her special way of caring, always making me feel warm and a part of things. Gloria was the last survivor of our parents' generation. I think a lot about how much we owe Nate and Sidel, David's parents, Diane, and my parents and yours, all of them growing up as kids of immigrants and making their way in the United States in the 50s and the 60s, and providing for all of us and ultimately for our children as they did. I am deeply sorry that I won't be at the funeral to honor your mom, but also, in a sense, to honor the entire generation of my aunts and uncles. I'll think about your mom a lot today, but I know I'll also reflect back on that entire generation of my parents and aunts and uncles. My mother had such an impact on us, and her passing reminds me of the verse from Nevi'im, from the book of Joshua in the first chapter, where there's a discussion about the death of Moses, and the Spirit of God comes to Joshua to tell him he's the one that has to be leading the children of Israel into the promised land. It's a statement of strength. And the Hebrew is Rak Chazak ve'amatz me'od lishmor lasod kechol Torah asher tzivcha Moshe abdi. Be strong and persevere so as to observe and perform all of the mitzvot that Moshe has given. And strength is really one of the things that I think about the most with my mother. It is something that defined her. You heard that Beth and I were honored at Carnegie Hall, and when we knew that she had passed, we had to make a decision. Are we going? And in my mind, I knew that my mother wanted me to be there. I knew that she wanted me to have the opportunities to sing on the stage of Carnegie Hall with Beth. And music was so important to her. I have memories learning piano where she would put an egg timer on the piano and say, you're going to sit there and you're going to practice until that egg timer goes off. Leon, you probably had similar experiences, right? So it was so important to her, and I know that she was listening. There is a piece that also that was performed on that stage, but I wanted to also share with you just another memory that I had. I was driving with my mother to visit my father's grave, and she told me she had a dream that there was a ladder going from the earth up to heaven, and my father was at the top of the ladder saying, Glor, come to me. And she said, no, Sam, it's not my time. She loved life, and it was really a statement about who she was and her own sense of who she was and what her time was. So Beth and I will now try and hope that she has peace, and we'll share with you our Sim Shalom that we sang last night.
Well, sort of. Yeah.
Try. Sim Shalom Tova uvracha Sim Shalom Chaim chen v'chesed v'rachamim Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael Amecha Barchenu Avinu Kulanu ke'echad Sim Shalom Tova uvracha Sim Shalom Chaim chen v'chesed v'rachamim.
This week we're reading in the Torah about the beginning of the Jewish people's wanderings as they leave Mount Sinai and their close encounter with God and head toward the promised land that they've only heard about but never seen. knowing the challenges of the path ahead and that they may sometimes lose heart when they face them, God provides for them a sign of God's constant, unwavering presence, a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Day or night, when the people falter in their faith in the path ahead, when they doubt their ability to endure, when they question whether they have the inner resources they need to continue on, they can look toward the pillar of cloud or the pillar of fire and be reassured. If God's presence is with them, then they have what they need to go on, not only to endure, but to thrive as they encounter the unknown challenges and experience the new blessings that await them. We are all still on that journey, trying to find our way on the path that lies ahead of us, sometimes unsure that we have the faith, the endurance, and the inner strength to continue. But we can no longer look to a pillar of cloud or a pillar of fire to reassure us when we waver. So what do? We look instead to those special human beings who take the place of the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire in our times, those people whose strong and unwavering presence reassures us that we can endure, that life is worth living, and that love will sustain us no matter what we face. Gloria was one of those special people whose strength and resilience served as a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire for her family and those around her. Small in stature, she loomed large in the lives of those she touched, bringing her strength and her intelligence to bear for the sake of those she loved, and serving as a model of expressing love through constant action. She was constantly learning and growing, rooted in Brooklyn, but adapting to life in Maine, in Ohio, in New Jersey, learning to cook as an adult, and learning to drive in her 60s. Gloria was a strong, unwavering, but kind and loving presence in the lives of her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. She maintained her independence into her late 90s, was always straightforward and never manipulative. She wanted to be remembered as she has been today, as a person who always told the truth. And her truth-telling was not about malice, but could feel like a welcome breath of fresh air in a world in which truth often suffers. Sam's disabilities later in his life put new responsibilities on her shoulders, but she handled them all, even recovering from the pain of his passing and going on to live good years independently, in command of her faculties and herself until the end. And her end was peaceful because she had left nothing unsaid, nothing unresolved, having lived with love and integrity throughout her long years. Gloria's death is such a loss, but her life is an incredible example and lesson for all of us. She was a beacon to all who knew her, a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire that gave of her strength to those she loved, reassuring them that they had everything they needed to continue on the path and to encounter all of its challenges and blessings. May her memory inspire us to strive to do the same for others in our lives. May her memory thus be a blessing to us always, and let us say, Amen. Gloria was such a constant presence in the lives of her family, such a rock that she seemed invincible. Even after health scares years ago, she knew that it was not her time, and she rallied to enjoy these good years she had. That's why, even at advanced age, her death still comes as a shock. It is so hard to believe that she has really left this world. Mark and Marty and Debbie, you had your mother with you for so long into your adult lives, an incredible blessing that you all knew and appreciated. That gave her all the more time to pour herself into you so that you carry her with you always. And with your mother's death, we acknowledge that you have lost your second parent. We remember your father, Sam, today as well. May you be comforted by the knowledge of how much they both shaped your characters, and by their support that you will always carry, that will never leave you. To the grandchildren, Eli, Ari, Talia, Dan, Josh, Becky, Ben, and Allie, your grandmother treasured her time with you and delighted in your close ties to each other, evidence that not only her family but also her values continued on in you. May you honor her memory by staying connected, remembering her and telling her stories into the next generation, the future that she intuited but knew she would not see. To all of you, to Mark and Andrea, Marty and Beth, and Debbie and Joel, Eli and Netta, Ari, Talia, Dan, Josh, Becky and Tony, Ben and Amber, and Allie, Gloria's beloved great-grandchildren, Avital, Samara, Gabriella, and Zoe, and to the other relatives who were touched and shaped by Gloria's life. May you take comfort in sharing your memories with each other and in being together, Gloria's lasting legacy in this world. To the living, we say, Lechi Leshalom, when we part, go toward peace, in the hope that each of us will find the peace that sometimes eludes us during our lifetimes. But when we part from those who have died, we say, Lechi B'Shalom, go in peace, secure in the knowledge that they now rest in perfect peace. And so to Gloria we now say, Lechi B'Shalom, go in peace, go in peace. After a long journey, serving as a beacon of strength and of love, may you now rest in peace. After our service here, burial will follow at Beth David Cemetery in Queens at about 2:00 p.m. Shiva will begin in North Jersey and then continue in Philadelphia at Debbie and Joel's home from Wednesday night through Sunday morning. We'll now rise as we're able for the memorial prayer, El Malei Rachamim, God full of compassion. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanafei HaShechina, B'ma'alot Kedoshim U'Tehorim, Kezohar HaRakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Golda Bat Nachman Lev Tzipora, Shehalcha Le'olama, V'gan Eden Tehei Menuchata, Hana Bal HaRachamim, Hastireha Beseter Knafecha Le'olamim, Utzro Bitzro HaChaim Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata, V'tanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkava, V'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Gloria Aron, who is now gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask with love that she find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bonds of our lives. May she rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. We can be seated.